Memories. Memories.
Welcome to my Psychology 1010 final project. In this video, I will be breaking down the way the memory process works, the problems with construction and reconstruction, and ways to boost memory. My three sources are the class textbook Psychology 2E by Spielman, Rose M. et al., Fleisbach, Klaus et al.'s Differential Effects of Semantic Processing on Memory Encoding, and Optimizing Learning in College, Tips from Cognitive Psychology by Putnam, Adam L. et al. First, we need to talk about how memory functions. There are three main steps to the memory process: encoding, storage, and retrieval. The first step is encoding. Encoding is the input of information into the memory system. There are two types of processes that take place when encoding: automatic processing and effortful processing. As the name suggests, automatic processing happens automatically, and effortful processing takes effort. Automatic processing is done without conscious awareness, like remembering the time you fell in love with Michael Jackson's music. Effortful processing is done with conscious awareness. You are aware that you're putting in effort to remember this information. An example of this would be recalling what Michael Jackson song you fell in love with first. Small note about encoding from the textbook. Material is far better encoded when you make it meaningful. Speaking about making things meaningful, there are three types of encoding: semantic, visual, and acoustic. Semantic encoding deals with words and their meanings. It is the most efficient type of encoding, and for the purposes of this video, the most important. There is also visual and acoustic encoding. Both are self-explanatory. Visual deals with images and things you see, and acoustic deals with sounds, words, and things you hear. Generally, semantic encoding offers a deeper level of processing than the other two. Which brings me to a study done in one of my sources, Differential Effects of Semantic Processing on Memory Encoding. In this study, various nouns ranging from 3 to 10 letters long were shown to participants. Before a word was shown, a prompt would be displayed on the screen that told the participants to determine one of the following about the upcoming word: whether or not the first and last letters of the word were in alphabetical order, whether the word referred to a living or non-living thing, or whether the word referred to something larger or smaller than a shoebox. What the study found was that both types of deep semantic processing, determining whether the word referred to a living thing or not, and if it referred to an object bigger or smaller than the shoebox, led to a better memory performance than the alphabetical task. After the encoding process comes the storage process, or the creation of a permanent record of information. There are three phases to the storage process: sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. Alright, let's break down the three stages of storage. Stage 1. Sensory memory. Here, we see the storage of brief sensory events, such as sights, sounds, and tasks. Storage here is very brief, lasting up to a couple of seconds. We are constantly being bombarded with sensory information we can't absorb all of. In the sensory process, information that is considered to be valuable will be moved into short-term memory, and whatever we deem as not important will be discarded. No, Michael, I don't remember the exact time I fell in love with your music. My brain deemed that information as not valuable, so I forgot. But don't worry, I'll always remember that I love your music. That's valuable information. Moving on to the next stage of storage, short-term memory. This is the temporary storage system that processes incoming sensory memory. Here, information from sensory memory is connected to information that already exists in long-term storage. Short-term memory lasts about 15 to 30 seconds. Something important to be remembered about the memory process is rehearsal. This is the repetition of information to be remembered and helps to move information from short-term memory into long-term memory. The last stage of the storage process is long-term memory. Here, we see the continuous storage of information. The capacity here is believed to be unlimited. It is generally accepted that memories are organized in semantic networks consisting of concepts. A concept is a category or grouping of information, objects, ideas, or life experiences. These concepts are believed to be hierarchically arranged in the mind, with related concepts being linked to each other. The link between two concepts depends on how often the two concepts have been associated. Activating any part of a semantic network, or a network made up of meanings, for example, let's say we activate this part right over here, also activates the concepts linked to that part to a lesser degree. This is known as a spreading activation. One part of a network is activated, making it easier to access the associated concepts because they are already partially active. Think of this like a spider web. Take it away, Miles and Miguel.
And these nodes where the lines converge?
They are the
Concepts. And the lines themselves are the links between them. In long-term memory, there are two types of memories: explicit and implicit. Explicit memory is what you consciously try to remember, recall, and report. Implicit memory, on the other hand, is not part of our consciousness and is learned outside of our awareness. It can't consciously be recalled, but it can be demonstrated in the performance of tasks. After the storage process comes the last step of the memory process: retrieval. Retrieval is the act of getting information out of memory storage and back into conscious awareness. There are 3 ways to retrieve information out of long-term memory: recall, recognition, and relearning. To recall is to access information without cues. Recognition is the identification of previously learned information after encountering it again. This relies on the process of comparison. Relearning is, as the name suggests, learning information that you previously learned. Alright, now that we are all experts on the memory process and all it entails, we can now move on to the problems with memory, specifically when it comes to the construction and reconstruction of memories. Construction is the formulation of new memories, and reconstruction is the process of bringing up old memories. But then why is it called reconstruction and not just retrieval? That is because when we retrieve memories, we tend to reconstruct them by modifying and altering them. Memories pulled from long-term storage into short-term memory are very flexible. It may not be intentional, but new memories can be added to old ones, altering and distorting facts of the old memory. One big factor at play in memory reconstruction is suggestibility, or the effects of misinformation from external sources that leads to the creation of false memories. Our memories are very vulnerable to the power of suggestion. We can claim to remember something that really is just a suggestion someone made. It is the suggestion that causes the false memory. Something related to suggestibility is the misinformation effect paradigm, developed by Elizabeth Loftus. Here, Loftus suggests that after exposure to additional and possibly inaccurate information, a person may misremember the original event. Loftus explained this with a study she ran showing people car crashes and changing the way she described the cars colliding when asking how fast the cars were going. I'm going to illustrate the misinformation effect paradigm a little differently for this video. Remember the songs I played in the intro to this video? Was this one of those songs? Don't rewind to the intro of this video. Just think about it and go with which answer comes to mind. Yes or no? If you said yes, congratulations! You're wrong! And you have just shown the results of the misinformation effect paradigm. I did not play that song, which is called Remember the Time by Michael Jackson, in the intro. I did, however, play it later in the video when explaining sensory memory. If you said yes, you have just proven that exposure to additional information can lead you to misremember the original event. If you said no, you are either paying a lot of attention or you are a Michael Jackson fan. Another big problem with memory is called encoding failure. This is memory loss before the actual memory process begins. This is kind of self-explanatory. If we don't encode a memory, we can't remember it because it just isn't there to be remembered. Alright, I know all this talk about problems with memory isn't the most positive thing, so let's turn this around and talk about ways to enhance memory. According to my third source, called Optimizing Learning in College, Tips from Cognitive Psychology, here are a few tips for boosting memory. These tips were intended for use in college and studying, but can be applied to any kind of memory. One way to boost memory retention is the read, recite, review method. With this, you would read a textbook chapter, then summarize what you remember reading, recalling the big ideas, and review the chapter, noting what you recalled and what you missed. This involves the act of rehearsal, which is crucial to committing information to long-term memory. Another way to boost retention is to write notes out by hand. Sure, typing them out is faster and lets you write more down, but writing notes by hand forces you to only write down the meaningful ideas, abbreviate using your own words and writing methods, and connect ideas to yourself and prior knowledge. Other tips, as suggested by the textbook, are constant rehearsal and repetition, chunking, mnemonic devices, and the self-reference effect. Constant rehearsal helps strengthen the links between memories and long-term storage, and helps further cement the ideas in your mind. Chunking is managing information into manageable bits or chunks. An example of this is remembering a phone number. You wouldn't remember 212-970-4133, but you would remember 212-970-4133. Also, that isn't a real phone number, that's Iron Man's phone number as shown in the comics. Mnemonic devices are memory aids that help us organize information for decoding. This can be anything from using PEMDAS for the order of operations to the song for the quadratic formula. C squared minus 4ac all over 2a. The last tip I will be covering is the self-reference effect. This is writing notes or thinking of something in your own words relating to things in your own life. And there you go. There is my breakdown of how memory works, problems with construction and reconstruction, and ways to boost memory. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you enjoyed, and hopefully I get a good grade on this project. Okay, bye.